Hi, I'm Mark from Valor Excel. Thank you for joining me. Today, I'd like to give you a brief introduction to a really useful tool called Power Automate. Now, if you already have a Microsoft 365 Business Standard license, you have access to Power Automate. If you don't have Microsoft 365, you can go out to the Microsoft website, and there is a section that talks in depth about Power Automate and shows you the available pricing options for both a monthly and an annual subscription. But in the example that we look at today, we will be doing so in a Microsoft 365 Business Standard license. So what exactly is Power Automate? Well, you may be familiar with a macro. A macro is an action or a set of actions that you can run over and over again as often as you need. And a macro is basically recording your mouse clicks and your keystrokes. Well, to some extent, that's kind of the concept behind Power Automate, except that Power Automate takes that to a much higher level. So today we'll be taking a look at just a couple of the things that you can do in Power Automate, and I want to specifically use an example as it pertains to Microsoft Forms. Now, this is not going to be a tutorial on using Microsoft Forms. If you would like to learn more about how to do that, I'll leave a link in the description below this video for a tutorial that I did a while back in which I showed how you can do an online survey using Microsoft Forms. But today I want to show you a basic example in Forms that will really give you a very good perspective into how Power Automate can help to streamline your processes and reduce unnecessary steps. So let's go over and take a look right now in Microsoft Forms. Now, if you're not really familiar with Forms, at its most basic level, it gives you the ability to create surveys and forms that you can send a link out for, and anyone who receives the link has the ability to complete the form, submit their response, and then you can see how they answered each one of the questions. So for the sake of what we're doing today, I've kept this really basic. I'm just calling this the 1, 2, 3 test form, and I've given us 2 questions, both of which have either a yes or a no answer that you could possibly come up with. And I want to do a couple of other things here before we test this out. So if I come up here and click on Collect Responses, the first thing I want to do is select Anyone Can Respond. So now anyone that I send this link to would have access to the form. So I could copy that and paste it into an email or into a chat and send it to anyone I wanted to. But before we test this out, the one other thing I wanted to do is come up here, click on the ellipsis, click on Settings, and at the bottom I'm going to select Get Email Notification of Each Response. And what that means is now anytime someone fills out this form, I will get an automated email telling me about that. So what we can do to test this out is click on Preview, and right now we're seeing the form exactly the way we would if we were the person filling it out. So I'm going to go ahead and for question 1, I'll say yes. For question 2, I'll say no. And now I'll click on Submit. And there you go. So our response has been submitted. So if I come back to the actual form, as the person who created the form, up here under this tab, I now see that I have 1 response. And if I click on that, I can see there is the response. I can see how each one of the questions was answered. And as more and more people respond, this number will increment, and I'll be able to go in and look at the responses individually. This is nice too because it also feeds all of this data into an Excel spreadsheet. So I can open it up and I'll basically have a running tally of every response that someone supplied. So this is great. Now, because of the fact that in the settings I selected that I wanted to get an email response, if we go over and take a look at Outlook, we'll see that I have received an automated Microsoft Forms email telling me that there is a new response to the test form. And that's wonderful. Now let's go back over to Forms. Now, one of the nice things that you can do in Forms is that you can have collaborators. So let's say that I created this form and that our unit was going to be using it, And I wanted all of my colleagues to have the ability to also make whatever kind of edits they would like to. And so I want to be able to let them be collaborators so that they can add additional questions, they can change anything around. And in order to do that, I can come up here, click on the ellipsis, and then select Collaborate or Duplicate. And from this point, I can click on Share the link to collaborate and view result. So there is the link. And now I can paste that link in an email, send it to my colleagues, and they will then have the ability to go in and make all the edits that I can and basically be a co-owner of the form. Well, that's all well and good, but the one drawback is, even though they have the ability to be a collaborator, if someone fills out the form, I, as the person who originally created the form, will be the only person who receives an automated email notifying me that there's a response. And that's not what I want, because I would like my collaborators to know when someone responds to the form. I don't want to have to take the automated email that I received and forward it to somebody, and I certainly don't want my colleagues to have to physically go into the form to check and see if there are any new responses. So what are my options? What can I do? Well, that's where Power Automate can come into play. So let's go over and take a look at Power Automate now. So you can access Power Automate by clicking on the app launcher and selecting Power Automate. And when you do, this page will open up. Over on the left, we have a vertical toolbar that gives us a lot of different options. And you'll notice that over here we have an option to create. We also have that same option right here. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to create in Power Automate a workflow that will automatically send out an email to the colleagues that I shared that particular form with. So even though I'll get the automated email coming directly from Microsoft Forms, Power Automate will then forward that same email to anybody I've collaborated with. So the first thing we'll do is click on Create, and across the top here it gives us 6 different options for creating a workflow. And today I want to look at just the first and the third one. But for what we're doing right now, we'll look at this one, Automated Cloud Flow. And if I click on that, it's going to open up this dialog box. So when you create a flow in Power Automate, the first thing you need to do is to give it a name. If you don't, it will basically be assigned an automatically generated name. But for this one, let's call this Test Form Flow. The very first component of a flow is the trigger. So the trigger is basically the event that will cause this flow to do something. The trigger is what will basically instigate any other steps that we put into place. Now, you can search through all of the available triggers, but very conveniently for us, the first one in the list here is exactly what I'm looking for, when a new response is submitted in Microsoft Forms. So I'm going to go ahead and select that, and now I'm going to click on Create. And so Power Automate is creating a new flow for us, and it's based around in Microsoft Forms when a new response is submitted. So the first thing I need to do here is identify what form we're talking about. If I click on the down arrow, this will give me a list of all the various things I can select from. So there is our 1, 2, 3 test form. I'm going to go ahead and select that. So that's our trigger, someone filling out the 1, 2, 3 test form. What we need to do now is establish what happens when they fill the form out. So we're going to add a new step. Now, a step is basically an operation. It's the action that will take place when something is triggered. You can search through all of the different options here, but I know that I want to send out an email through Office 365. So I'm going to go ahead and select right down here, Office 365 Outlook. And when I do that, it will give me all of these different possible actions. So the action I'm going to select here is send an email. And now, when a new response is submitted to the form that we selected, an email will get sent out. So the first thing we need to do is to establish who will receive the email, and I can enter any email addresses that I would like. For the subject, I'm just going to say test form response. I can select the font, change things around. And for the message, I'm going to say a new response has been submitted for the test form. Now, I want to do one other thing. So let's go back over to our form. So what I'd like to do here is I'm going to highlight the URL for our form. I'll copy it. We'll go back into Power Automate. And now I'm going to add that URL as part of the body of our text here. So now when someone receives this email, they can access that form directly to view the response that's been submitted. So that's really all we need to do. I'll go ahead and save that. So the first thing we want to do here is come to the upper right-hand corner and click on Flow Checker. And that's good news. There are no errors. It's not giving us any warnings. So we've structured everything correctly. Now this is an extremely basic flow, but we could add new steps and have other conditions to make things happen. But the last thing I want to do is click on Test. And we're going to test this manually. I'll come down here and Save and Test. And now it's saying to see it work now, submit a new response to the selected form. So I'm coming back over here to the form. I'm going into Preview, and we'll complete this as if we were the person submitting it. I'll click on Submit, and now we can see that our flow ran successfully. And I'd like to double check that, so I'll go to the email address that I sent that to and verify that it's there. And there is the email that Power Automate forwarded because of the flow that we set up. So that's really a great way to eliminate manual steps, and it really streamlines things. You can automatically send something to people who would not normally receive it unless you did it manually. In Power Automate, in the vertical toolbar on the left, there is an option that says My Flows, and that will show you any flows that you have created, and you can modify them from there if you needed to go in and edit them to make something different happen. I'd like to create one more flow today, and let's click on Create. Again, we have all of these options, and this time I'd like to select Scheduled Cloud Flow. So this is a really handy flow that you can use in situations where there might be something that you only do occasionally, like a report that you create on a certain day each month. And you want to be able to set up a reminder for yourself so that you make sure that the process doesn't get overlooked. I'll click on Scheduled Cloud Flow. Let's call this Monthly Report. I'm going to go ahead and use today's date, and it's a little bit past 2:30 p.m., but I'm going to go ahead and say that I want this to be triggered at 2 p.m. So I'll select that, and I want it to repeat once every month. We could use really any of those. You could have something that is sent out on a weekly or a daily or an hourly basis, but we'll go with month, and I'm going to go ahead and create. So this is showing as a recurrence. So it will automatically recur once per month. So now we need to use this trigger to tell Power Automate what we want it to do. So I'll select New Step. And for this, I'd like to send out an email communication that I receive each month so that I know that this report is due. And so I'll select Office 365 Outlook, and I want to send an email. And I'm going to send this to myself. And for the subject, I'm going to say Monthly Report. And for the body of the message, I'm going to say, please send the monthly report. I'll save that. All right, and now I'm going to come up here and we'll look at the flow checker. Again, no errors and no warnings. That's good. Now you'll also notice in the list of our flows here, it's indicating that this is a scheduled flow, whereas the other is an automated. We don't know when someone will submit a response to our test form, but we know that we want this monthly report reminder sent every month at the same time. So let's go ahead and check to make sure that I received an email. I did set the time on this for 2 p.m. on this date each month. It's almost 2:45 right now, so I should have already received the email notification. And there it is. So that's a great way to keep yourself or others in the loop on tasks that you only do every now and then. This was an extremely basic demonstration of Power Automate, but I suggest that you check it out. There are a lot of templates that you can work from and so many different things that you can do. I'm sure you'll find something that will help streamline your processes from the vast array of tools in Power Automate. But what can you do with everything else in your business? How do you know if you're really maximizing your time and using your resources wisely? Well, if you click on the link in the description below this video, you can download a free PDF. It's called Taking Your Organization's Temperature. It'll give you a real eye-opener to how you do things in your business, and you might discover that you don't have everything functioning quite as smoothly as you thought. If the information I shared with you today was beneficial to you, please give this episode a like. And in the comments below, let me know if you have ever used Power Automate, and if so, what flows have you automated? I'd also like to invite you to subscribe to Valor Excel. On a regular basis, we publish content that's specifically geared toward helping small businesses and nonprofits to truly thrive. I invite you to join us for the next installment. Remember, at Valor Excel, we're committed to helping you do smart work. Thanks again for joining me today. Please come back for our next installment, and until then, goodbye for now.